Colorado's top election and law enforcement leaders respond to President Trump's latest threat against voting rights. The state has a new way for all of us to see COVID-19 statistics. You can dig into the numbers yourself. Reading the fine print on Senator Cory Gardner's health care bill, it requires insurance cover pre-existing conditions, but allows insurance companies to reject you for having, you guessed it, pre-existing conditions. Answering your next question about the National Guard's role in fighting Colorado's wildfires. And the pandemic has this city's puppet theater looking for a hand. It's Friday. You gotta give me a dad joke or two, because this is next. Coloradans start voting in 60 days. That is when ballot drop boxes and polling stations open. You know the drill. You go there each time. Who do you see? They're the smiling elections workers. Maybe you'll see the bipartisan team of election judges, perhaps a poll watcher from each party. You typically do not see armed government agents, because this is America. America does not allow that kind of brazen voter intimidation. And that's why Colorado's top law enforcement and top elections officials are reacting so strongly to President Trump's newly announced plan for what polls might look like on Election Day.
We're going to have everything. We're going to have sheriffs, and we're going to have law enforcement, and we're going to have, hopefully, U.S. attorneys, and we're going to have everybody and attorney generals.
So let's be real clear about this. The president has no power to order local sheriffs to do anything. Federal law, 19 U.S.C. 592, specifically prohibits the president from deploying the military for elections. A spokesman for Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser told us today that they believe that that same federal law would also stop the president from sending other armed federal agents out to the polls. A federal order from the 1980s sprang out of Republicans putting off-duty police at the polls to intimidate minority voters in their neighborhoods, but that order is no longer in place. Today, Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold said that the president's plan to deploy law enforcement to polling places was, quote, indistinguishable from tactics used against black voters in the Jim Crow South. So right before the U.S. Senate left on vacation, Colorado's Republican Senator Cory Gardner came out with a new health care bill. It says it would protect pre-existing conditions, which is not where Gardner has been on the issue of pre-existing conditions prior to, say, election season. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger looks at this bill and, first, a truth test on that very issue.
Millions of Coloradans.
Duty and Honor is out with this ad against Republican Senator Cory Gardner.
The one thing they shouldn't have to fight for?
Normally, I'd start with fact-checking the claims. But first, what the heck is Duty and Honor? And why is this ad almost identical to a previous one by something called Majority Forward?
Like cancer, diabetes, or heart disease.
OpenSecret.org has a great flowchart showing Duty and Honor and Majority Forward are basically one and the same. And Majority Forward works with the Senate Majority Political Action Committee, which is connected to top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer. Now that you know who's behind this, let's go to the claim.
Why did Cory Gardner vote with the insurance companies 9 times to eliminate protections for people with pre-existing conditions?
The ad asks why, and this truth test can't answer motive. I want to focus on the 9 times, which isn't the whole story. I'll just cut to the chase. Gardner has a voting history of trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act or limit its funding. When I asked Duty and Honor for supporting information, it provided me 9 votes Gardner made between July 25th, 2017 and October 30th, 2019. 2 of them were bills or resolutions that dealt with health plans that could be exempt from covering pre-existing conditions. 6 of the votes were amendments. Most were offered up by Senate Democrats, and Gardner voted against. The amendments generally tried to ban bills that restrict health coverage. The other vote mentioned was procedural. Here's the thing. Gardner voting against the Affordable Care Act, including pre-existing conditions, isn't new. When Colorado voters elected him in 2014, he already cast multiple votes from being in the House in 2011, 2012, and 2013, when he voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act or to prohibit the Treasury from funding it. Yes, Gardner has a voting history to weaken the Affordable Care Act, including coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. Which brings us to a bill Gardner introduced 2 weeks ago. The bill is entitled To Ensure Coverage of Pre-Existing Conditions Under Private Health Insurance. The 8-line bill does require insurance companies to cover pre-existing conditions. It just does not require an insurance company to take you on in the first place. I spoke with the vice president of Kaiser Family Foundation, a nonprofit that focuses on health issues and is not connected to Kaiser Permanente, to help me understand how that can be deciphered from a 1.5-page bill.
In order to truly protect people who are sick with pre-existing conditions, you have to be willing to strictly regulate insurance companies and provide the kind of funding that would keep the insurance market stable. This bill from Senator Gardner falls well short of providing comprehensive protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
Gardner's bill is not currently needed because the Affordable Care Act is still in place. However, 1 week after the election, the U.S. Supreme Court will take up a case that will determine if the Affordable Care Act remains. Kyle, I asked Gardner's campaign spokesman for time with Gardner to talk about his bill. I didn't get that time.
So, Marshall, because of the fact that Republicans are trying to take down the Affordable Care Act right after the election, they're, of course, going to get asked on the campaign trail, what is your plan to replace it with? And it would seem like Gardner's plan is to say, look at this 3-line bill and assume that people don't say, well, I saw on Next that that is actually horse excrement. Does that appear to be the plan, that he's going to point to the 3-line bill and say, that's my ACA fix?
Well, I'd like to ask specifically, according to Kaiser Family Foundation, it would just need it would need more context besides just a few lines, but it would need something like guaranteed issues. I think that's the term that's in the ACA, but you don't even need the ACA to cover for pre-existing conditions. You could craft a bill that even if ACA was gone, you could have pre-existing coverage of everybody, but it's just the nuance of the wording, and right now the wording is not in that bill.
Sure. Yeah, and a fair question for voters to ask. Say, if we take away this healthcare system, what do we replace it with? All right. Thank you, Marshall. Appreciate it. The number of patients currently hospitalized in Colorado with COVID-19 did tick up today. The state this afternoon reported 156 patients. That is 10 more than yesterday. Our 7-day moving average, which that kind of flattens out the peaks and brings up the valleys, is down more than 200 patients a day from a couple of weeks ago. The trend for Colorado's 7-day positivity rate, that's encouraging. It's down nearly 2% from 2 weeks ago, currently sitting at 2.72%. That's the percentage of all COVID tests that are coming back positive. So, throughout this pandemic, the state has said that it understands that it's difficult to sort through the information. It's trying to come up with a better way to present it to both the public and to journalists. We try to break it down here nightly in a way that's consistent and understandable. We want to look at the same metrics again and again and again. Now the state has updated its website. It makes that data easier for you to see from home if you want to get in there and really get after it. The state's completely transformed this section of its website that has COVID data. It's more interactive, it gives you more control to sort and to filter it. It also shows expanded hospital data, including patient demographics. That's something that we've wanted for a long time. And there's more information on outbreaks and where they're occurring.
As this pandemic has evolved, we've really changed in the way that our data needs have been represented. And our questions of the data and your questions of the data have really evolved over time as well.
So take a look. We're curious about your feedback. State would be too. If you see any numbers that jump out at you, let us know. State website went active, that portion, for the first time earlier today. So at one point, we talked quite frequently here about the opioid crisis in Colorado. Then, of course, the pandemic happened, and it diverted both resources and our attention. So today, we check back in on the epidemic, now competing with the pandemic. Here's Anusha Roy.
It was almost expected.
We're concerned that 2020 is going to be our deadliest year again for drug overdose deaths, not only in Colorado, but also in Denver.
And it's kind of believed to be maybe due to a couple of things, due to COVID and isolation and difficulties with getting treatment.
Fentanyl is here. We were never too cute to think fentanyl wouldn't be here.
Fentanyl is a powerful synthetic opioid that the city put out another warning about a month ago. Denver's coroner said between January and August of this year, 68 people died from an overdose involving fentanyl. That's up from 25 in the same time period last year. And overall, this graph shows the Denver Health Paramedics Division responded to more overdoses from the start of the pandemic to the middle of August of 2020 compared to the same time frame last year.
With the increased anxiety, the unemployment.
We've been working hard for the last 5 or 10 years to expand treatment, And our goal right now is just try not to lose ground.
That has been tricky, especially with massive state budget cuts. Legislators did preserve a couple of key programs, including one working on access to treatment in rural Colorado. And $175 million federal dollars went to behavioral health, helping groups on the front lines keep their doors open.
In the midst of a pandemic, also an overdose crisis.
In the middle of all of this, Denver's public health department was on the receiving end of an audit. The report said it wasn't doing a good enough job of communicating and building trust with the groups running syringe access programs. In response, DDPHE said it's working on a plan to address those concerns within the parameters COVID allows, saying in part, the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly impacted the department's capacity, so we want to be thoughtful in our actions.
So one of the concerns outlined in the auditor's report was that the groups who were running the syringe access groups were saying that they didn't know how the city was going to use the data. They were worried it would get shared for policing or clearing out homeless camps. Well, the city in response said the info they're getting is anonymous. It's more of a summary so that it's not even possible for them to do that. Kyle, they said confidentiality is a critical component to the work that they're doing every day.
Anusha, glad you are back on that beat because it's so important. And to everybody who watches Next Nightly, you'll notice Anusha Samir is back. Thanks, Anusha. You asked why Colorado isn't using the National Guard to fight wildfires. It is. Well, look at that and the state of our state's 4 large fires when we return. A theater in Denver will not survive the pandemic.
Well, she's just having a hard time because there's no kids that can come right now.
They're offering one last goodbye. And your good news reminds us not to take things so seriously. Next.
Another day in the 90s, another day with smoky skies here in Denver. Much of the Front Range, typically a great shot out there with the blue skies, the Rockies. Not the case once again today. We do have high levels of smoke and ozone pouring across the western slope all the way here to the Front Range, and that will continue through tomorrow. Smoke from wildfires burning in California also adding insult to injury as this ridge of high pressure is directing that directly into our state. Tonight, cool with temperatures across eastern Colorado in the upper 50s and 60s, and tomorrow once again a scorcher with highs in the upper 90s. 98 degrees here in Denver, and that potentially would tie our record. Upper 90s with isolated storms for you on Sunday. The heat rolls on early next week with a chance for a few scattered storms and a slight cool off. Keep those fingers crossed for that one next Friday.
Mandatory evacuations have been ordered for people near Penick Pass as the Cameron Peak fire gets more active south of Highway 14 toward Crown Point. The Cameron Peak fire has burned about 26 square miles at this point. That lightning caused Pine Gulch fire, which is up north of Grand Junction. That's the biggest in the state. It's gone through roughly 195 square miles. The 46 square mile Grizzly Creek fire, that's a priority outside Glenwood, where I-70 is still close to the canyon. And firefighters think that people caused the Williams Fork fire, which has gone through about 16 square miles southwest of Fraser. Our next question was raised by a viewer this week named Tom, who asked, why aren't we able to utilize the National Guard for the forest fires? Tom, your timing on this is impeccable. This afternoon, Governor Polis activated the Guard to assist. They told us earlier in the day the Guard only gets involved if somebody asks. They're currently doing traffic control on the Cameron Peak fire, and there's a Guard helicopter that's available for rescues. More choppers are being set up for water drops on the Williams Fork fire, and they'll have one on standby for search and rescue out of Gypsum. National Guard says they can do all this without an impact to their other big mission, supporting COVID-19 testing. A former prison inmate is helping other women rebuild their lives.
I think that the gifts that I was given were for me to share with others.
The pandemic has basically shut down live entertainment.
Well, it's been kind of lonely because there's no kids around.
Even that kind of live entertainment. So they're looking for new homes in smaller venues near you. Next. A one-of-a-kind business in Denver is getting rid of its employees. Denver Puppet Theater cannot survive without kids. Our Tom Cole gives us one last look behind the curtain.
It's a place to come and have fun with your imagination.
The one and only Denver Puppet Theater is closing.
Well, I can tell you all about things around here because that's I know everything. We've been here 25 years.
And the owner,
just me.
Annie Zook now has to find a new home for all these characters.
Probably 1,000 altogether or more.
Over 1,000 little puppets are out of work, but they understand why.
Well, probably all that sickness, the coronavirus is the big reason. It sure is, yeah. Just slows everything down, can't make ends meet. It's a sad deal. Yeah, I just really want to move them.
So the sale starts tomorrow, and there's no hard feelings among the puppets.
Maybe I'll go back to school and get my MBA, who knows? I can't make a living having children 6 feet apart, and this is a real hands-on place.
Annie Zook is ready. It didn't come easy, but she can handle it. Her message to the kids was always to overcome.
I think through puppetry and through stories and art that we can help children learn to be strong.
So the sale begins and the puppets get an extra long rest.
Oh, she just drives me all the time. She's pulling my strings night and day. It's terrible.
Annie is ready.
I'm ready. I'm okay with it.
To hang it up and put on yet another hat and try something new.
It's been fun. I've loved it.
For Next, I'm Tom Cole.
That sale they're holding is tomorrow, Denver Puppet Theater, 8 to 5. Every single Friday, you leave me feeling great because you share your good news. That and your feedback next. Every Friday for our 4 years here has featured your good news. Our photojournalist Corky Scholl stopped by City Park, met a woman thankful for second chances.
It's a beautiful day. There's a nice breeze out here in the park. It's a really good place to be and to reflect. My name is Corinthia Brown. My good news today is some of the things that we do in the community. So I'm the founder and the executive director of the Don't Look Back Center for Women and Trans Women. So helping women and trans women rebuild their lives from addiction, trauma, PTSD, whatever walk that they took. We talk to people, we reach out, we see if they need food, if they need clothes. From my own personal story, I have lived experiences. I'm in recovery. I'm also a woman in recovery. I'm a returning citizen from the correctional system in Colorado. I also have been homeless. I've been separated from my children. We had to rebuild that relationship and rebuild our lives all over again. And part of my personal story was I've lost one of my own children to addiction. And so I've tried to turn that pain from that into empowering me to help others that are struggling. We have a whole epidemic. And I remember the walk that I took and how hard it was. I think that the gifts that I was given were for me to share with others. The gift of life, the recovery, forgiveness.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I was forgiven and given another chance. So that's my good news.
All right. You never know who you're going to meet when you just stop and talk to somebody. Note from Rick tonight, who says, we are not going to sit through all the political BS to get to the real news. Rick says he's gone over to channels 4 and 7. Rick, I think we might just have a respectful disagreement about what real news is. I think that it's real news whether or not people can vote without armed intimidation come November. I think it's real news whether or not people's health insurance covers their pre-existing conditions. I get that there's politicians mixed up on all that and nobody likes politicians, but it's also real news. See you next time.